because the Constitution is the supreme law of this land. What happens if the Congress, what happens if the President, what happens if the Supreme Court suddenly declare the Constitution and Bill of Rights null and void? Does that mean it's null and void? There are three sovereignties that we have. You have a sovereignty given to you by God Almighty. No document, no one can take that right because they didn't give it to you. God gave it to you. We have a sovereignty as a state. Wouldn't make any difference if all other 49 states suddenly hauled down the stars and stripes. And I believe if God has a flag anywhere on the face of the earth today, this flag is it. And if they haul it down, does it mean that Oregon has to go ahead and haul its banner down also? You may decide that you'll want to run up a banner beside it, and I would suggest the banner that says, "Don't tread on me," because the fact is you have a sovereign state here, and the state is part of the United States, but you still have a sovereignty no matter what those turkeys do in Washington, D.C. And even if the legislator of the state of Oregon were to haul down the stars and stripes, does that mean that you as individuals suddenly go belly up and say, "Beam me up, Lord, it's getting too tough for me here"? No, it means that you occupy, you stand, you network yourself together as a sovereign people, because we are the ones ultimately responsible for the life of the Constitution. Now, I very frankly am a Christian. I don't care what your religion is, you ought to be very happy that you have a Christian running for President of the United States, because Christian principle says God will judge you. I will not. You may live your life as you will, and it will be God that will judge you for it. My job as president is to make sure that you have liberty under the Constitution, that you do not have tyranny. And I don't know if anyone here would think that under a new world order you will have God-given rights. Very clear under the new state's Constitution, the world Constitution, that the rights come from the United Nations, which are just simply made up of powerful men. And so we are going to stand. We will either stand, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we were able to stand as a nation? Because you can't deny, and I'm not trying to suddenly be a preacher. I'm not a politician. I'm not a preacher. Let's make it very clear. Politicians belong on the bottom of the ocean with whale droppings, and every international banker, and almost every lawyer that you could probably think of. But this is Saturday, and we're getting close to Sunday, and so I think I'm safe to say that when, as an intelligence officer, I would be remiss if I did not use documents that have been proven to be true in the past, because they do have prophecy in them, do they not? And those prophecies are coming true today in more abundance than ever before. We're seeing a wonderful time on the face of the earth. I say I wouldn't have been placed upon this earth at any other time. We could have been born in the Dark Ages, not much going on, maybe except a little inquisition. But here we are at a time when we are just about to have perfect government, I believe. You know, and just reviewing it a little bit, again, I don't mean to get religious, but I talk by the Spirit. I don't have any prepared notes. And you know, that's something you ought to ask George Bush just one time, or Bill Clinton, or H. Ross Perot. Stop reading from the 3x5 card and just tell me what it is that's in your heart, or what it is that's in your mind to say. We don't care if they flub words. We speak the same language. We know what the thoughts are. They can transmit those thoughts and feelings, can they not? But when I look at what's happening in the world today, there's no question. Is there a global government that is building just like a tsunami that would literally crash over all continents, all nations? There is. Is there not a one system of economics that is forming? Already it has formed, has it not, in Europe? They call it the EEC now. There are no more borders. They're all just one continent. And isn't it growing? Do you think it was some kind of colossal coincidence when all of a sudden the Soviet system just went belly up, and not even Jean Dixon, with the use of her crystal ball, could forecast that that was going to happen? Friends, that wasn't coincidence. That wasn't just magic. What is the antithesis to free enterprise? You see, along with being the very first people in the history of the world to have our rights given by God, where we the people make a government, we also had a thing called free enterprise. You hear it always described as capitalism. Capitalism, friends, is Ma Bell, it's ITT, it's General Motors, it's Monkey Wards. But what really has made America great? It is free enterprise, where you as an individual, with the talents God gave you and your willingness to work, could go out, and if it was nothing more than selling apples alongside the road, you were supposed to be able to do that without government interference, without outside interference. That was your ability to make your own fortune as you will. Now that is the thesis. What is the antithesis? It is communism. Who bought communism? In 1917, the World War was almost over, but Jacob Schiff from Kuhn and Loeb Bank in New York City, a subsidiary of Rothschilds, which had Europe already under control, gave Lenin and Trotsky $20 million in gold to buy up the Bolshevik Revolution. And you might wonder, why would an American purchase communism, which is in direct antithesis to our style of life? And the reason is, it's called Hegelian theory, because the synthesis is developed out of the struggle between free enterprise and communism. And what is this synthesis called? The New World Order. So when you see communism going belly up, don't be led into these commentators that say, yay, good for Latvia, good for Gastonia, good for all of these countries. They just can't keep those freedom-loving people down. When communism goes belly up, friends, you'd better look at the other end of the spectrum. What has happened to free enterprise in America? As an individual, you can barely exist right now as a private business person. There are so many government regulations, there are so many taxes, there are so many certificates, so many agencies you have to go through, that if you aren't some kind of international corporation funded by the bankers, you can't afford to have the dental plan and the health plan and all of these other plans that slowly breed slaves. You know, we roared for liberty, didn't we, 200 years ago? What are we doing today? You know, I notice on bumper stickers driving around, national health care now. And I notice in Washington, D.C. today, as people are marching, we want the government to give us more now. You know what happens? We roared for liberty, and today we're whimpering for security. And there is a trade-off, because before we stood on our own and basically could tell government where to go and where to pack it. But when you get on your knees and lick the hands that feed you, all of a sudden you find yourself a slave. And isn't a slave have perfect security? Oh yeah. The slave doesn't have to ask if he's got a job. He just works where they point and show him. The slave doesn't have to ask what they're going to eat, because they're fed at the appropriate time. The slave is provided a bed. Is that what we want in the United States of America? It is what our founding fathers were willing to bleed and died for. As I look over this room, I don't see a lot of what I would say are natural Americans, meaning American Indians. Most of us came over, probably our ancestors on the Mayflower. Some of us came over on slavers. We have one thing in common today. We are Americans, and we are a body. And like a family, don't we fuss and fight all the time? We do. You've got preachers, and I think they're right in doing so, carrying signs that say, "Down with homosexuals." And you've got gay liberation rights over here screaming and hollering for what they think is right. And you've got pro-lifers, and you've got pro-choicers, and you have environmentalists, and you have lumber producers, and you have all these people with a different voice. Friends, some of us can be ears, some of us noses, some of us fingers and toes. Some of us are going to be anal orifices. But you try to get along without one. You've got to have them. It is part of the body process, is it not? Now, the point I'm trying to make to you is this. We can be like a family, we can fuss and fight, but if you're a peace officer, you never want to be called to a family feud. Because when you arrive on the scene, they usually all turn on you. Today, we need to stop being labeled. So many times, someone will come up and say, "Bo, I would love to support you, but I'm a liberal, you see, and you look like Attila the Hun to me." Or they say, "Bo, I'd love to support you, but I'm pro-choice and I understand you're pro-life." We've got to strip the labels away. Who here has ever been stampeded by rabbits? For no one. Good. Jimmy Carter, he's the only person I know in recorded history that ran from a rabbit. If you'll remember they had the rabbit that jumped out at him when he was fishing in Georgia? Normally, people are not frightened. They are not stampeded by rabbits. That's precisely what those who would steal our birthright want us to be. And by dividing up into all these little fractionalized groups, I'm for the snail darter, I'm over here for the spotted owl, well, I'm for the desert tortoise, I can't support you. With all these different groups, that's what we are. We must come together as just Americans. That's what we are. We're not right, we're not left, we're not liberal conservative, we're not Democrat Republican. We've got to stop the division. We must stand as Americans. If we do not stand, we're going to deserve what we fell for. So we're going to do what is right, and we have made the platform based on what is right, without any consideration for political action committees or special interest groups. For example, it doesn't take any kind of genius. I'll bet you that all of you have already figured out what is wrong with America. Now, if you have an automobile that will not run, you try to find the thing that is most wrong, probably to fix first. If you're ill, you try to find out what it is within your body that has got you down. The cancer in the body politic of the United States of America is simply one main thing. If we rid our body of this cancer, this one thing, all of a sudden, you're going to see many parts of our body get well and be able to function again. The one thing that must be corrected is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Fred Smith's Federal Express. And anyone who wants to grind on that later after this is over, it's easy to prove. The Federal Reserve System is not federal. It is owned by private banks. And the private banks issue the money and control the credit, do they not? Just like Thomas Jefferson said. And now, if you are an American, if you are a newborn babe, the American birthright is bestowed upon you. It should be the most priceless thing on earth, and yet it comes with a price tag of $42,000 today and growing every day through compound interest. Now, how is that, Mom and Dad, Grandpa and Grandma? Is that a wonderful legacy to leave those who follow you, allowing them to be debt slaves on the continent that was conquered by our fathers? It is a time, my friends, that we gird up our loins. It is a time that we look truthfully. And it is a time that you start asking other presidential candidates, when you call in on the talk shows, if they ever appear before you, anywhere, everywhere, if it is Bob Packwood, if it is your county, one of your county commissioners or a city representative, ask them about the Federal Reserve. The other day, someone asked on a nationwide radio program, H. Ross Perot, what are you going to do about the Federal Reserve? And he said, Federal Reserve? What's wrong with that? Now, do you think that that is just stupidity? Or do you think that that is honestly an honest answer? That a person just doesn't know, who has $3 billion in his bank account, what the Federal Reserve is? How can we get rid of the Federal Reserve? Now, when I first took this job as a presidential candidate on, I didn't do it lightly. You may want to play for the Raiders, but by golly, you had better be capable of playing. You might want to be the quarterback, but you'd better be able to lead them to victory before you put on the helmet and the uniform. Don't suit up unless you are ready and willing and capable of doing the job. And so I had to think about it for a while. How are we going to get America, first of all, out of debt? Secondly, how are we going to get America back under sovereignty? And third, how are we going to get America back on her feet as a healthy nation? World Health Organization says it's going to cost America $1.5 trillion a year, per year, just tending to those who have AIDS within the next few years. Friends, we can't afford that. Something has got to change. Charles Bauscher, our Comptroller General, says the national debt will redouble again in the next few years. Why? Compound interest, friends. It's not Reaganomics. It's compound interest that does it. So how are you going to solve it? We all know what's wrong. How do we solve it? Well, when I finally had the answers, and you know the answers are not complex at all. I think the most confounding things on the world are made simple by God Almighty. And you know, every one of the answers to what I have just said are found in a very simple document. It's called the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. If we'll just use that as a building plan, someone, the bankers, have taken apart our country, our constitutional republic, and now we have a plan to rebuild it the right way and do it right the first time. And so here's how it is. John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963 decided that America was going to go back on a silver and gold standard. And so in June of '63, he signed an executive order that began to print these United States notes. Now, the significant thing about them, because here is a Federal Reserve note. This Federal Reserve note has nothing behind it. There's no gold, there's no silver. It is a fiat money system. But this note right here has a debt attached, about 50 cents, and it's compounded annually. Well, this one right here has nothing behind it, the way that it was made, but there's no interest. And it could be, because this right here says that this is to certify that there is on deposit within the Treasury of the United States of America $1. Is this a dollar? It is not. This is a dollar right here. But this gets you this. This is an insurance against inflation. It is an insurance against depression. The only time America had a tremendous depression was right after the Federal Reserve got in and they started printing this, which is worthless. And they cut off the money supply. And was there any great drought across America during the Great Depression? Was there any loss of manpower due to war? Were there any pestilence, any scourges? Did we not have any manufacturing ability? What happened in the Great Depression? The banks turned off their Federal Reserve notes, and as a result, our economy, the blood of the economy, is the currency, dried up. So what we do, and see how hard this is. we are going to go back to a gold, because that is money, and silver standard. How hard is it? Well, here is how easy it is. On January the 21st, that is the inauguration day, as I have taken the oath of allegiance, the very first thing I will say, because they're going to try to take the microphone away from me, because they know what's coming up. And I'm going to grab the mic and say, as of this day, I am resurrecting John Fitzgerald Kennedy's executive order, which authorizes the printing of United States notes in lieu of Federal Reserve notes until we go back on a gold and silver standard. Now, how hard was that? Now, the Spotlight newspaper has said, Bo can't do that. Listen, I'm not the Spotlight. I'm not Willis Carto. I do know something. Willis Carto wanted to be the person who ran my campaign. And he said something to me. I'll just be very honest with you. Willis Carto said, Bo, this is going to cost a lot of money. And the hair on the back of my neck curled up. And that's normally a testimony to me that something big time is wrong. And I was not going to be any kind of bait for the collection of funds for anybody. Not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not even Willis Carto, no one. And so I said no. And since then, of course, I've been catching a lot of flack from all quarters. But there's an old saying in combat, when you're catching flack, where are you? You're on target. That's exactly right. And so in the Spotlight they say, Bo can't do that. Friends, J.F.K. already did. And so don't tell me like a bumblebee that I can't fly. I don't care if you are from Northrop Avionics University. Bumblebee doesn't know it, so he does. J.F.K. started it, so I'm going to continue it. I will resurrect the John Fitzgerald Kennedy executive order. Now, Reagan has put it to bed, but I'm going to resurrect it. And we are going to go back to a gold and silver standard. And that isn't just lips moving, because you should require everyone, whether it's a city councilman, whether it's a U.S. senator, whether it's a presidential candidate, require them to write it in a contract. So there will be a contract here in Oregon. Richard Flowers will be helping to make up that contract, and some of the people that are helping us in the various towns around the Oregon area. You make sure that your voice is heard. I'll sign the contract. Contract law is very powerful. There are two sides. For your support, then I sign the contract to do everything that is on there. If I fail to do it, it's simple. You don't have to recall, you don't have to impeach. You just fire me, because that will be part of the contract. But there's not one thing that I'm telling you that I have not figured out very carefully, and I don't care if Spotlight, New York Times, CNN, Mr. Ted Turner, or whatever the other guy's name is up there in New York has got too much money, what they say is, can anyone here say that I cannot do this? By golly, I will do it, and I'm going to do it because it is written in the Constitution. And if it doesn't square with the Constitution, friends, it is not law. And so we are perfectly on our legal rights. We're on firm ground doing this. Now, that's the first thing that we do. Secondly, it is part of the Communist Manifesto that you have an indirect tax on the people. When you compare the Bill of Rights and you lay it beside the Communist Manifesto, which do you think we are following today? You know, the Manifesto of Communism. And so the second thing we do is we get rid of the income tax because it is unconstitutional. Now again, Spotlight newspaper has come out and said, and at least God bless Spotlight, because one thing, I'm not against Spotlight newspaper. They are a needful thing. You're going to read articles in there that you don't see printed in the New York Times or the LA Times or Catherine the Great's Washington Post. But the point is, they again have said, Bo can't do this. Bush lip. How do we get rid of the income tax? You see, we know what's wrong, so how do we correct it? Well, see what's wrong with this. Bill Benson, a man that I was with about a month ago in Chicago, I think they tried to kill him in prison. But Bill was in a wheelchair when I saw him about a month ago, but now he's standing up on walkers. He went into prison a whole man. Bill Benson has 17,000 documents that he has collected from every state house of every state that was there in 1913 when the 16th Amendment, the income tax, was passed, allegedly passed. It proves that the 16th Amendment was never ratified. Friend, is there any statute of limitations? I want you to think about it, because people are going to say he can't do it. Bush lip, you watch us. We're going to take Capitol Hill, and we're going to get back on our feet as a healthy, solvent nation, and here's how we do it. We send a special presidential delegation. There'll be one person going to each state house, because Benson told me the other day, he said, Bo, you don't have to do that. I've already got all the documents. But I told him, Bill, you'll be in charge of this commission, but we have to do this, because it has to be official, does it not? That presidential delegation has one purpose. Were the amendments, because we're going to do more than check just the 16th. If we had the 16th foisted upon us, what do you think about the 17th? And what do you think about the other amendments? So we're going to check them all just to make sure. When they come back, do you think they're going to say that the 16th Amendment was never properly ratified? If they do find that, what happens to the 16th Amendment? All right, it is null and void. Now, what is the point of law? Here's the question. Ask it yourself. Get your lawyer to answer it. There is no statute of limitations on continuing fraud. The income tax is unconstitutional. It says right in our Constitution, the people will not have an indirect tax levied on them, not indirect apportionment. And by golly, that's the income tax is. That's why it had to be an amendment, because it is unconstitutional. So all of a sudden, the income tax is history, and what goes with it? An organization that should be called the Gestapo, an outfit that would be better. Well, you know, you may say this is cruel, but I'm trying to be accurate. Wouldn't it be better if the IRS wore the black uniform of the Schutzstaff? Wouldn't it be better if they wore the high peak caps of the KGB? Because isn't that what they've become? They're the only government agency that doesn't have to follow any rules. Now, the person that's going to be busier than I am on the 21st day of January is the person who is writing out the pardons for every American citizen that has been wronged by the IRS that has ever been in prison. Now, is there anything wrong with what we've done so far? You might be worried right now. You might say, well, Bo, what about jobs for the IRS? They'll have jobs. They're going to be filling sandbags. Because do you think that the international bankers, when we get rid of the Federal Reserve, are just going to roll up their little red carpet, stick it under their arm, report back to Rothschild, the Bilderbergers, the Club of Rome in Europe and say, sorry, boss, they routed us out. It was just like old Hickory's time. What do you want us to do? They aren't going to go down easy, are they? It's not going to be easy, is it? But will it be worth it? Yes, it will. Not for us. I've lived a great life. I can go out here in the woods right now because I'm prepared to do that better than anything and live off what you have right here in the state of Oregon without ever going to the 7-Eleven again. But can you imagine that? No mall for the rest of your life. But the fact is that it will be worth it. We're doing it for those that we've brought into this world because that's what our fathers did for us. We're the first generation, folks. I'm talking grandmas here and maybe some great-grandparents, and we're the first people, the first generation, to leave our children less of a nation than we inherited. We cannot do that. Is there anything I've said so far that cannot be done just as simply and easily? When am I going to get rid of the IRS and the income tax? The hand is about right here. Because how long did it take in order to get rid of the Federal Reserve? It said, as of this day, I am resurrecting John Fitzgerald Kennedy's 1963 executive order authorizing the printing of United States notes. The hand's about right here. And I am